Hey, and welcome to the Leniverse. I am Leni, and today I bring you my more or less last-minute prediction as to what books will be shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. Although prediction, maybe it's better to call it a wish list, because I think it is pretty futile to try to predict what book prize judges will do. That said, last year 4 out of my top 6 ended up on the shortlist, and I'm hoping to have the same hit rate this year. Some of these books I have talked about in other videos, in my updates, but I have really fallen behind on those updates because life happens and these videos take a lot of time to make, and I realized that I just had to prioritize actually reading the books on the list. Even doing that, I did have several days where I couldn't. It started to feel like a chore. It wasn't fun, and I had to just read other things, do other things. So I haven't quite managed to read the entire long list. There are 2 books that I haven't read yet. One of them is River East, River West, and then the other I have started, but I have only read 30-40 pages. And that's A Trace of Sun. So do take that into account. It could very well be that one of those 2 books is completely brilliant and should be on the shortlist. I have looked at a few reviews, and my initial impression, at least, is that they are probably not quite as good as the 6 I have chosen. Because out of those 6, if I only get 4 right, I really have trouble saying which 2 could be cut from that list. I'm not going to rank them because I'm not sure that I can. With each book I've had the feeling of, oh, this is my new favorite. And then after a couple of days I think about it and I try to rank them in my head. Is this my new favorite? Did I like it more than my previous favorite? It gets difficult. So any ranking would actually change from day to day, maybe even hour to hour, minute to minute. Yeah, like all these textbooks, in case you couldn't tell. Okay, so instead of ranking them, I will list these books in the order that I read them. So first out, we have Brotherless Night. From this book, I learned a lot about the Sri Lankan Civil War. The focus of the book is on family, moral dilemmas, how to do the right thing in a morally ambiguous situation. The book might have some pacing issues. It starts out with a bang, and after that it slows right down for quite some time. The pacing wouldn't really be an issue for me if not for that beginning. That sort of sets the expectation that you would have a lot of action. But because of the way that the book is written, the focus of the book, even when there is a lot of action, you don't feel like you're in the middle of action till later on in the book. But I was never bored, and I felt really invested in the characters and in the story, and I really hope that the book makes the shortlist. Next up is Soldier Sailor, which is an emotional roller coaster of a book. It is really intense. You are inside a woman's head, and she has postpartum depression. And this is a book that does basically one thing, and it does it really well. The book is an experience, not always a comfortable one, but it also has a lot of humor. And it tells a story from a woman's perspective in a way that you don't see a lot. And honestly, what is the Women's Prize for Fiction for if not to give us women writers, yes, but also women's perspectives? And now by that I don't mean that the books that have previously won featuring male protagonists shouldn't have won or anything. I love Demon Copperhead and I loved Piranesi, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that this kind of story is rare. Okay, third, I have Ordinary Human Failings, which I keep thinking of also as ordinary human feelings, but yeah, failings. It's definitely a book about failings. It's a book about how horrid the tabloid press can be. It's a book about us versus them. And it is a book that takes fairly unlikable characters and not only humanizes them, but makes you empathize with them. It does that better for some characters than others. I felt zero empathy or sympathy or compassionate feeling for the reporter. After that, I read And Then She Fell. This is another book with a mother who has postpartum depression. And I said that Soldier Sailor is a book that does one thing really well. And Then She Fell does a lot of things really well. Let's see, it deals with grief, identity, mental health, addiction, family, racism, motherhood, indigenous heritage, storytelling, choices, and quite probably a few other things as well. It is a book that stressed me out so much that I had to take breaks just to take a breath, walk around, do something else. I'm not sure I have ever been as scared, as on edge of my seat in a book that it wasn't in the horror or thriller genre. Actually, more so in this book than many books in the horror or thriller genre. Some people say that this is a genre bending, that it has a bit of horror and thriller and even magical realism in it. I disagree on the magical realism, at least from my understanding of what magical realism is. And I think it is solidly a literary fiction book. It just stretches what literary fiction can be. I think it was absolutely superb, and it might even be my favorite, although the previous books I mentioned might also be my favorite. Then we have In Defense of the Act. Now, this book was surprisingly funny and non-moralizing for a book that is actually quite sad and deals with suicide, domestic abuse, depression, eating disorders. Yeah. It packs quite a lot into just like 200 or so pages. It's also remarkably life-affirming for a book dealing with those topics. And then finally, I have Enter Ghost. I do worry a little bit that if Enter Ghost wins, or even if it's just shortlisted, that people will say, oh, it's just because of the Palestinian genocide. Actually, if they say that, then they are at least saying Palestinian genocide, and that would be an improvement too. But no, honestly, it's a timely book, but it's also a really good book. It shows you multiple facets of Palestinian experience and identity. It shows you how art can be resistance, but discusses if art as catharsis is also too much of a bread and circus for the people. It gives you a brief history lesson. It shows you different interpretations of Hamlet. There's a lot of theatre in this book, and I can quite see that maybe this book isn't for everyone if you have zero interest in theatre, in Shakespeare, have never read or watched Hamlet, then you might be flailing a bit. But that's not a fault of the book. Go watch Hamlet. That was the last book that I read, and it is tempting to fall into a long soliloquy here of how the title fits not just with the Hamlet part of the book, but how the theme of ghosts and haunting crop up many places in the book. But I shall not bore you with that. I shall resist the temptation. So those are the 6 books that I would really like to see on the shortlist. I do have a feeling, if I'm going to make a prediction, that maybe The Wren will be on the shortlist. I would quite understand if it is. The Wren is the kind of book where I can see that it is extremely well crafted, very well written, but there's a disconnect between me and the book where I'm not feeling it. And I can quite understand that other people might have that same disconnect with books that I have put on my list. Whether it is Enter Ghost or And Then She Fell, or the style of In Defense of the Act. And for the judges, it could be that The Wren just has clicked with them in a way that it didn't with me. There are other books that I could definitely also see end up on the shortlist, but I've decided not to hedge my bets too much here. I have my 6. I recognize the possibility, maybe even likelihood, of the Wren taking the place of one of them. But I couldn't really tell you which one. It depends how balanced a list they are interested in. Are they going to say, no, that's too many Irish writers, in which case they would probably remove Soldier Sailor or Ordinary Human Failings? Are they going to say that one depressed mother is enough, in which case they're also not going to end up with my 6 books? Actually, there might be depressed mothers in every book on the list. Depressed mothers, that's definitely a theme this year. I could see them also going for maybe Night Bloom or the squash book, Western Lane. I mean, Western Lane made it onto the Booker shortlist, so it could make it onto this shortlist as well. Okay, so now I'm hedging my bets anyway. No, seriously, I have my 6 books, and if I don't get a full 6 there, I think that the most likely candidate is the Wren. And we'll see tomorrow morning. What are your wishes or predictions for the shortlist? Do you have an absolute favorite? Did I mess up by not getting to the last 2 books on the list? Let me know in the comments. Inquiring minds want to know. And I'll probably be back already tomorrow with a reaction to the shortlist announcement, where I will either weep and rage or be extremely happy. So, thank you for watching, and until tomorrow.